3 days ago, I stood in a kitchen I'd cleaned 100 times in a house I was never quite welcome in, staring at an empty fridge shelf. The hot sauce was gone. My hot sauce. The one I brought from home because this family never kept anything that tasted like me. I asked where it went. Eric shrugged. Barbara, the matriarch, said she thought it was expired, and my son Logan, who watched me eat it every day, said nothing. That's when it hit me I wasn't one of them. I was their background noise. The silent one who cooked, cleaned, and swallowed everything, even the insults. So I put down the groceries, and I picked up my life. I didn't leave because of the hot sauce. I left because it was the last thing they thought they could erase without consequence. Thanksgiving weekend, small town, Ohio. We'd driven 3 hours from Chicago to visit Eric's mother, Barbara, in the house that smelled like bleach and judgment. Eric had insisted like every year. It's just a few days, Olivia. She misses Logan. Logan was 21 now. He didn't miss her, but like always, we obeyed. The kitchen was tight and overly decorated. Barbara hovered like a hawk, correcting how I chopped onions, questioning my salt, ignoring my allergies. And then it happened. I opened the fridge to get the bottle of hot sauce I brought from home, something to make bland turkey taste like something. It was gone. I asked voice light, "Anyone see my hot sauce?" Barbara didn't even look up. I tossed it. It looked old. Eric kept buttering rolls. Mom probably did you a favor. That stuff ruins your stomach. And Logan, my son, who watched me eat it every day at home, who I breastfed while recovering from an emergency C-section that nearly killed me, said, "Yeah, it kind of stinks, Mom. Chill." I stood there, in silence, and I realized they'd erased me one condiment at a time. They didn't see me as a person anymore, just a function, a body that washed dishes and took the blame. And I knew this wasn't about hot sauce. This was about every time I bit my tongue so they didn't feel uncomfortable, and I was done. Thanksgiving dinner was served at exactly 5:00 p.m., not a minute earlier or later. Barbara's rule. The table was set in her usual controlling fashion, mismatched crystal placemats with embroidered turkeys and that god-awful centerpiece she insisted Logan made in 3rd grade. Eric carved the turkey while Barbara paraded the homemade cranberry sauce she'd clearly scooped from a can. I sat in silence, thinking about the hot sauce, not the taste. The fact that something mine, something small and sacred, had been thrown out like it didn't matter, like I didn't matter. Then the seafood platter arrived. Shrimp cocktail, scallops in butter, crab dip. I blinked. "You know I'm allergic." Barbara waved a hand. "Oh, it's just a little shellfish. You've been fine before." Eric chimed in, not even looking up. "Just eat around it." I turned to Logan. "You know I can't have this. I've told you both 1,000 times. Logan scoffed. "Why do you always make everything about you?" I stared at my plate. The turkey was dry. The air was thick. The chair I sat in suddenly felt colder than it had ever been. They wanted me quiet, agreeable, and invisible, even if it meant risking my health. Barbara raised her wine glass. To family, and the women who hold it together. Everyone clinked glasses, except me. I stood up, calm, controlled, like a storm choosing where to land. "I'm not eating this," I said, "and I'm not doing this anymore." Eric frowned. "Doing what this?" I said, gesturing to all of it. "This performance, this obedience, this pretending that I'm part of something when I'm just a placeholder." Barbara's smile faltered. "Olivia, it's Thanksgiving." "No," I said. "It's the day I stopped being your servant." I walked out, Not in a huff, not slamming doors, just gone. Because I finally understood I didn't owe them a scene. I owed myself a life. The drive back to Chicago was silent, not because they were ashamed, because they didn't notice I was gone. I'd left a note on the nightstand, not dramatic, just clear I'm going home early. Please don't call. And they didn't. Not that night. Not the next morning. I sat in my apartment alone, lights low, slippers still damp from the rain. And for the first time in years, I let myself remember what I had survived to get here. Logan was born in winter. My water broke 2 weeks early. Eric was late. He'd gone to watch a football game with friends. I'd called an Uber through contractions. At the hospital, there were complications, placenta previa. I lost too much blood. My hands went cold. I saw the ceiling spin. The nurses shouted. Someone pressed a mask to my face. And just before I slipped out of consciousness, I thought, this is how I go. After all that effort, this is how I vanish unnoticed. But I didn't die. I woke up to an empty room. Eric was sleeping in a chair. Barbara brought flowers and immediately asked why I hadn't breastfed correctly. Logan was in the NICU. I wasn't allowed to hold him until the next morning. My chest was stitched. My voice was hoarse. My worth. Apparently up for debate. They never spoke about how close I came to dying. No gratitude, no apology, just comments like, "At least the baby's fine. Some women bounce back faster, you know." I know. I know because I bounced back so hard I forgot I was ever broken. Until the hot sauce, until the seafood, until the look in my own son's eyes when I reminded him I mattered, and he blinked like he didn't recognize me. I sat on the floor of my kitchen that night and whispered to myself, "You almost died for them, and they still act like you're disposable." And somewhere deep inside, the woman I used to be the one who needed permission approval, a seat at their table, finally packed her bags. Because this time I was choosing me. Monday morning, 9:13 a.m. I walked into the Cook County Courthouse with my coat zipped all the way up and a folder tucked under my arm. It held my marriage certificate, my bank records, and a single printed photo from Thanksgiving dinner. The one where I wasn't in the frame. Barbara, Eric, and Logan smiling at the table. I'd taken the picture. I always took the pictures, not anymore. The clerk asked if I was sure. Absolutely, I said, signing my name like it was a declaration of war I no longer felt guilty for. Filing for divorce at 51 wasn't how I imagined my life. But then again, nothing about this life had been what I imagined. At home, I packed slowly, not because I was sad, because I was savoring it. Every drawer I closed felt like a line drawn. Every item I left behind his books, their family photos, the frying pan Barbara bought us for our wedding, was an act of release. I took what was mine. My journals, my plants, the red mug with the chip on the rim that nobody else liked. I looked around the apartment one last time, the sofa where I'd nursed a fever with no help. The hallway where I'd cried silent tears after Eric told me I took things too personally. The bedroom closet where Logan once hid a Mother's Day card he never gave me. Let them keep the furniture. I'm taking back my oxygen. When I closed the door behind me, I didn't cry. I didn't look back. Because I hadn't just packed up a failed marriage. I'd packed up every lie I was ever told about what a good woman should endure, and I was done enduring. The first night in my new apartment, I slept on the floor. No bed yet, just a yoga mat, a blanket, and the echo of my own breathing in a space that didn't smell like anyone else's rules. It was small, barely 500 square feet. The kitchen sink dripped and the walls were scuffed, but the windows faced east. And that meant I got the sun. I didn't tell anyone where I went, not Eric, not Logan. I left no note this time. I just vanished like they always assumed I would eventually, but instead of disappearing, I began. I made a list on the back of a takeout receipt. Buy new sheets. Get a plant I won't kill. Travel somewhere where no one knows my name. 2 weeks later, I booked a solo trip to Santa Fe. I packed light 3 outfits, 1 novel, a bottle of that same damn hot sauce they threw away. At the airport, I nearly turned around. Not out of fear, out of habit. The habit of asking permission for joy. But there was no one left to ask, and that felt like freedom. Santa Fe was dessert and color and strangers who didn't ask what my son was studying or when I'd be back home. I stayed in a shared Airbnb. My roommate was 27, pink-haired, a UX designer named Haley, who thought I was cool as hell for traveling solo at 51. We had wine on the roof, watched the sun bleed into the hills, and she asked, "Do you miss them?" I said, "Not yet," and I meant it. The next day, she brought me to a community breakfast hosted by her mom's social group. There were folding tables, homemade muffins, people with names like Star and Daisy, and for the first time in years, nobody asked me whose wife I was. I was just Olivia. That night, I journaled until my wrist cramped. Day 1 of being only mine, I was not needed. I was not erased. I was just allowed, and I slept like a woman who had made peace with her own name. Haley invited me to a storytelling night at a local cafe. It was open mic, string lights, warm chai lattes, the kind of space where people didn't whisper brave like it meant broken. She nudged me toward the sign-up sheet. "You have something to say," she said. "We all do." I stared at the pen for a long time. Then I wrote my name, not Mrs. Hayes, just Olivia. When they called me up, I almost didn't go. My legs were steady, but my heart kicked like it still needed someone's permission. I stepped up to the mic, took a breath, and said, 3 months ago, my husband and son threw away my hot sauce. Not on purpose, they said. Not to hurt me, they said. But they knew I loved it. And they didn't ask. People chuckled softly, then fell silent. That bottle had traveled with me across states, across apartments, across years of swallowing what I wanted so they could be comfortable. And it was the last thing I allowed them to erase. A woman near the front nodded. Another one wiped her eye. I didn't leave because of the hot sauce. I left because it was the 100th time they told me I didn't matter, just without using words. The room was still. They told me I was ungrateful, that I had everything. But everything meant them. And I finally asked, "What do I have when they're gone?" I looked down at Haley, who was smiling. No pity, just pride. The answer is, I have mornings that don't start with apologies. I have a name that doesn't get talked over. I have silence that isn't punishment. And I have a future one that doesn't ask me to shrink. Someone started clapping. Then everyone did. And for the first time in a decade, I cried. Not because I was hurt, because I was heard. Later, Haley hugged me. "That was the softest mic drop I've ever seen," she whispered, and I thought, this is how a life restarts, not with fireworks, with the sound of your own truth filling a room and not being denied. It was a gray Thursday when I opened my email and saw his name. Subject line, "Can we talk, Eric?" After nearly 3 months of silence, the man who once told me I overreacted to everything was now reaching out like nothing happened. I didn't respond. 2 days later, Logan texted, "Hey, Dad told me you're in Santa Fe. Can we talk? That one made me pause. My son. The boy I once rocked to sleep through colic and fever, who once clung to me like I was his whole world before he learned from his father that women like me were just supporting characters. I told Haley. She said, "What do you want?" I said, "Closure." She raised an eyebrow, or confirmation. I didn't answer. We met at a coffee shop near my rental. I came early. They came together. Eric wore a too-tight polo, and that same smugness I once mistook for charm. Logan looked older, tired, unsure. They sat down. Eric spoke first. "I've been thinking. Maybe we rushed things. Maybe we all needed space. But Logan and we've missed you." I sipped my drink. Said nothing. Logan fidgeted. "I didn't know it hurt you that much." I looked at him. "You didn't ask." He looked away. Eric leaned in. "You've made your point. You've proven your independence. But family doesn't just disappear." I tilted my head. "Did you think I disappeared, or did you just never imagine I'd stop orbiting around you?" He blinked. I continued. "I didn't prove anything, Eric. I remembered who I was before you all taught me to forget." Logan spoke up. "So, there's no chance," I smiled gently. "There's always a chance. But not for what you're hoping." He looked confused. I clarified. "There's a chance you learn from this. A chance you become a man who doesn't wait until his mother vanishes to value her presence. A chance you stop acting like love means obedience." I stood up. "To both of you, I don't hate you. I just refuse to belong to people who only see my worth in hindsight." I left them at that table. No hugs, no dramatic exit. Just the sound of two men realizing that her silence wasn't confusion. It was closure. The letter came in a torn envelope handwritten in stiff cursive. Barbara Hayes. She hadn't emailed. She hadn't called. She wrote like she couldn't bring herself to speak the words out loud. Olivia. "I know I wasn't kind, but I'm not well. And Eric won't answer. I don't have anyone else, please." I sat with it in my lap for a long time. Not because I was conflicted, but because I wanted to feel nothing. And I did. That's how I knew I could go see her without giving her power. Her apartment was smaller than I expected. Dim. Smelled faintly of Lysol and old fabric. Barbara looked like herself, just faded. Thinner, slower, still wearing pearls like she was auditioning for forgiveness. "I didn't know who else to ask," she said quietly. I sat across from her. "That's not my problem anymore." She blinked. I added, "But I'm here. So let's get you what you need." I spent 2 hours helping her fill out Medicare forms, contact a social worker, set up grocery deliveries. It was transactional, efficient. Barbara tried once to bring up the past. "I didn't mean to make you feel excluded," I cut her off. "Barbara, I'm not here for a confession." She looked down. "I just thought, maybe we could talk." I shook my head. "You want comfort? I'm not the person you get to ask that from anymore." Tears welled up. But I felt nothing but clarity. You raised a man who thought women were tools. You protected him when I almost died giving birth. You erased me meal by meal, comment by comment. And now that he's gone, you're looking for a woman to save you again." She said nothing. I stood, grabbed my bag. "I'm not your daughter. I was never your equal. I was your cleanup crew." At the door, I paused. "I did what I could today. You'll be okay, at least materially. But don't confuse kindness with reconciliation. I don't owe you a happy ending." Then I left. Not lighter, not heavier, just done. My new apartment had creaky floors and a window that leaked cold in the mornings. But it was mine. No one told me how to arrange the furniture. No one complained about the spices in the kitchen. No one asked what I was cooking for dinner because sometimes I just didn't. And that was the point. I bought a couch in a shade of green Eric used to call too loud. I painted one wall marigold. I adopted a senior cat from the shelter and named him Oscar because he looked like someone who'd survived a few divorces of his own. I spent my mornings writing. Not a memoir, just memories. Pieces. Moments I'd once dismissed as nothing that now looked like scars. I taught part-time at a local community college. Creative writing. Mostly to women who wanted to tell their stories but didn't know where to begin. One of them asked me, "How do I know if it's worth telling?" I said, "If you're still thinking about it, it's already taken something from you. Tell it. Get it back." On Sundays, I hosted a quiet circle in my living room. Tea, blankets, voices. We called it Second Chances Anonymous, but really it was just a space to breathe without being interrupted. Haley dropped in sometimes. So did her mom. Even Natalie made the trip from Chicago one weekend and cried on my shoulder like I used to cry on hers. One evening, I stood barefoot in my kitchen, Oscar twirling between my ankles, cooking dinner just for me. No one judged how much salt I used. No one asked why I liked eating alone. And I thought, this is it. Not a finish line, not a comeback, just a quiet, honest life. And that's more than enough. I looked at the framed photo by my window, a shot of me in Santa Fe, laughing, mid-sentence face turned to the sun. The caption I'd written underneath in pencil read, "I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I was finally allowed to imagine something better. And I had made it real, room by room, choice by choice, day by glorious, ordinary day. It started as a letter, a short one. Just a few lines I jotted down at the kitchen counter while Oscar napped near the heater. Dear woman sitting in the car, afraid to go inside. Dear woman buying the cheap wine again because it helps you go silent. Dear woman staring at the empty fridge where your favorite thing used to be, I see you. And I know. I didn't intend to publish it, but Haley read it and said, this isn't a letter. This is a match. Light it. So I did. I submitted it to a local publication under my full name, Olivia Bennett. No pseudonym, no initials, because I was no longer hiding. It went viral, not in a glossy New York Times kind of way, but in inboxes, screenshots, messenger threads between women who whispered, "This sounds like me." I thought I was the only one. I didn't know someone else had survived this quietly. That was the win, not the clicks, the echoes. I received a card in the mail, no return address, just block handwriting. Your story made me pack my bags. I didn't leave yet, but I'm closer. Thank you for showing it can be done without burning everything down. I held it to my chest and exhaled something I didn't know I was holding. I had become what I never had proof that freedom doesn't always come with fury. Sometimes it comes with grace. Quiet intention. The last page of my notebook was nearly full now. I wrote, I am no longer angry. I am no longer waiting to be seen. I am no longer asking, was it really that bad? It was, and still I made something beautiful after it. On my 52nd birthday, I took a walk at dawn. No party, no cake, just me, the sky, and the sound of a world that finally felt wide enough. Not because it had changed, but because I had stopped shrinking to fit inside it.